Okay, we are now live.
Can people mute? I hear a lot of background noise. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kwesi Atakra. I will be moderating our event for today. First, I want to thank all of you because I know it's a very busy day with lots of things happening at lots of side events for the AGRF. So we really are glad that you made time to be able to join with us. And as you know, the theme we are addressing is the Africa Union, European Union collaboration. And we are basically saying it's a game changer when it comes to resilient food systems. We will be hearing a little bit more about what this partnership really entails. We've been informed that this partnership has been running for some time and that there is a plan for it to transition into a platform, and that this is where the game changer element is going to come in. Generally, before one could say any research initiative will be a game changer, I think there are 3 P's that we have to keep in mind. First is the P of partnerships. And we will soon hear that this initiative really began in a partnership mode. The second P is a P for platform, because once the partnership is up and running, you really want to create an elevated profile for the partnership to be more substantive and visible. And so we'll be hearing about this platform dimension of this issue. And then finally, the third P is a P of policies. You can't go anywhere in this sort of domain without having clear policies in place to help to guide the transition that we all want to see. So it is a great pleasure that I welcome all of us to this event. And I will be introducing a number of people who will be speaking directly to us, but also all participants are key players in this. And I therefore want to encourage you to be very active in using your chat box. You know, get into the chat box, give us your name, your institution, where you're coming from, you know, just put something in the chat box so that we can aggregate that also to show people who are actively in the platform having this discussion. We would also be using the chat box for looking at questions. So if there are any questions that come to your mind as presentations are going on, and not just questions, there's something you want to say. It may be a comment, it may be a remark. Please put it in the chat box and we would see how to handle that. And I also want you to know we'll be running a couple of polls just to help us. As a matter of fact, the first 2 polls are basically to help us to know who is in the room. And we'll be getting to that shortly. So, ladies and gentlemen, without getting into too much talking, let me begin by asking you, as I've already done, to put something in the chat box about your name, your institution, if you like, your position. I would ask the technical moderator to also put the poll number 1 on the screen. We'll do poll number 1 and poll number 2, and these are very simple. It's just for us to get more information. So as soon as the poll gets on the screen, we will act on them. While that is being done, let me also encourage you that in some instances, you may want to raise your hand. As a matter of fact, I don't know whether that facility is available. So if it's not there, then just forgive me. But for now, we are waiting for poll number 1 to be able to help us to know who is in the room. Just especially in relation to the stakeholders, the different stakeholder groups that are participating in this event. There may be some problem with the poll number 1 is not coming. Okay, well, in that case, just so that we don't lose time, I would suggest we go ahead. In the course of the proceeding, we can still get to poll number 1 and poll number 2, because as I said, it's only to help us to know the various stakeholder groups who are there and some other issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, the heart of the matter we are addressing today is resilient food systems. And that also happens to be the theme for the UN Food Systems Summit. So what is happening in AGRF today is very much linked to the summit, ultimately. So to set us off for today, we're going to have a setting the scene presentation, which will focus on this subject of resilient food systems, but also link it with the policy dimension of the high-level policy dialogue, which is a grouping put together as part of the EU-AU Partnership in Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture, FNSSA. So we will have Dr. Shadrach Muepuli addressing that subject. Until recently, Dr. Muepuli was the president and CEO of the Agricultural Research Council, ARC, of South Africa, a responsibility he assumed in 2006. In this function, he served as a member of the Africa Union, European Union High-Level Policy Dialogue Working Group, the HLPD Working Group. Currently, he says he has retired, but he's not tired. So he's still in various things. He is chair of the South Africa National Advisory Council on Innovation, NACI. And he continues to hold a number of high-level positions, especially within various boards. It's a great delight in having Shadrach with us this afternoon to share thoughts in relation to this subject matter. So let me invite Shadrach, Dr. Muepuli, to take the floor and share his thoughts on the subject. Over to you, Shadrach.
Thank you, Kwesi, and I'd like to thank the hosts for this particular session, for inviting us to share with them the work that we've been doing in respect of the partnership on the EU on FNSSA. My role today is really to try and engage with the participants in the context of the FNSSA partnership between the AU and the EU. And I will be trying to speak to you within my capacity as a member of the working group of the high-level policy dialogue. The high-level policy dialogue working group had put together or requested a study to be conducted around issues that pertain to food systems resilience. And perhaps it's appropriate that we share the outcomes of this particular study. For that, I will try and share the screen. And if you could please confirm that it's visible on your side, and then we can take it forward from there.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. Basically, this is a study that's been conducted by a team, and you'll very soon see who they are. In the particular study, the the various members of the study consulted a variety of experts, conducted a number of interviews and roundtables to gather the information that they had actually put together. The slide you see before you is just a brief outline of the study, so I'm going to try and be brief. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I think it's important that you at least start to see who the participants are who are involved in putting together this particular study. The study team by Dr. Caroline Kalenius, Magdalene Nettinger, Maria Mernet, Karen Kitire, and Thomas Fischer, who then also used a panel of experts and conducted a number of workshops, including an expert workshop. Food system resilience tends to be a matter that sometimes is a little difficult to have a common understanding. So perhaps it's important that we demonstrate that the team has been able to derive a common understanding of what is a food system resilience. It's really about the capacity over time of a food system to provide sufficient, nutritious, and accessible food to all its actors, despite various and uneven, unforeseen disturbances. This is quite important because it really gets to the heart of things in terms of the resilience of food systems. The key features here is the ability of food systems to cope with a range of different stresses and disturbances, particularly those that are unforeseen. It does happen at various levels, multiple levels, and tends to be fairly complex over space and time. And there needs to be a functional objective to ensure accessible and healthy food for all at all times. The common understanding really is around food systems and the various ecosystems that impact upon the food systems. It's your technology and innovation and infrastructure, it's the economic and market drivers, the biophysical and environmental drivers, the political and institutional arrangements, socio-cultural drivers, and so on and so on. I won't go into all of those in terms of this particular slide, but at least it gives you a sense of the kinds of things that impact upon food systems and its resilience. The key feature being the ability to enable resilience, which is around bouncing back from disasters or disturbances, and whether that food system is transformative in terms of its resilience. Obviously, one needs to have a sense as to in what framework and metrics, how do you measure the food system resilience and being able to deal with that. Obviously, one needs to understand there are also trade-offs. In some instances that may not necessarily be very clear, and very often they can be neglected, between resilience and other food system properties, between different levels of food systems resilience, and the scales of food system resilience, and between different food system outcomes. The team found it imperative that there needs to be methods of analysis of different food systems, being a descriptive analysis of the structure of the food system, so that we enable an understanding of the interactions of the complex systems and their behaviors, comparison and monitoring of food system performance over time, and the co-design for future proof of the food systems and identifying of entry points to food system changes. Obviously, all of these elements in terms of the methods for food system analysis need to enable the various methods to analyze food systems so that they can be there and existing. These methods need to be purposely combined to study food system resilience, and that the data for qualitative food system assessments are scarce very often. That's what's been found. An agreement on some of the indicators is not necessarily always there, but is required, and the metrics for quantitative assessment in large part are still in the early stages. Obviously, disturbances for food systems can come from a variety of different sources. and the crises can be different, and they are increasing and tend to have a global impact in nature. You got the political conflicts, you got extreme weather events, economic crisis, pestilent diseases, and their duration varies, and in some instances it expands, and their geographic spread and frequency in the scale, and of course they're multiple in nature. We currently, as a global community, going through the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which then is beginning to also demonstrate to all of us that different food systems are affected differently. There appears to be indirect effects, mostly severe, arising from lockdowns and border restrictions. There appears to be feedback loops within some food systems. Local and global food systems tend to be highly interlinked. The effects of food systems in different parts of the world tend to come through slightly differently, and that is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, vulnerable populations, as always, tend to appear to be affected the most. There are closer interlinkages with other systems, such as health systems and ecosystems and economic systems, arising from the impact of the pandemic. Obviously, the resilience needs to be built on different levels, at the individual level, at the household level, at the enterprise, at the national, at the regional, and at the global level. Obviously, we need to explore how best to operationalize food systems resilience and ensure that it is specific to a particular context. Effectively, what are we, operationalize resilience to what? It's really the resilience of food system activities and outcomes, processing, packaging, retailing, and storing and consuming food, and against all different types of shock for consumers, peasants, women, farmers, and all, and the resilience over time for a whole range of stakeholders and actors. Obviously, one of the things that has come through in this study is there needs to be a certain set of principles that need to be examined and used as a basis or as a tool towards managing food system resilience, diversity, connectivity, variables and feedbacks, adaptive system thinking, encouraging learning, broadening the participation, and promoting the polycentric governance systems.
Shadrach,
yeah.
sorry,
Yes.
just to inform you, you've got 3 minutes left, so I just wanted to alert you about that.
Thank you, Kwesi. Obviously, there needs to be an understanding of the knowledge gaps on functions and levels around the different food systems, balancing the diversity and redundancy. Food system resilience needs a stronger integration on policies of the EU and AU. Resilience of food systems is not specifically reflected in policy making to date, but will soon be, hopefully. And of course, we need to ensure that the interconnections between the AU and the EU food systems and joint response mechanisms become fully explored. Obviously, the policies are important levers, and they need to prepare for unforeseen crises and strengthen resilience by applying general principles. The AU and the EU have been working together to foster research on food systems in a variety of different ways, and they perhaps could begin to explore fostering research on food system resilience. In the current scheme of the platform or the partnership, the focus on food system resilience has not necessarily been the major focus, but it needs to be there as a major cross-cutting theme. And it hopefully will build the platform for knowledge exchange, learning, and exploitation around understanding of the different food systems. The slide before you is just a quick picture of some of the themes of existing projects, or some that have been done and concluded between the AU and the EU, and the number of projects that are involved in each of these particular types of studies under these different things. So the partnership exists and it is delivering on some projects, and it is delivering some insightful information. What is key is that this particular platform or partnership needs to develop a common understanding of food system resilience, including the associated concepts and the trade-offs that actually would need to be balanced, and the metrics for measuring resilience to food systems. This could include the specific context in understanding different research, how research can help with different impact pathways, specific crisis, the principles for resilience, which could help to develop the various resilience strategies. And hopefully, with this particular engagement and partnership, we could improve on our understanding and on our common policy responses to enable effective response mechanisms to shocks and stress, and therefore thereby enabling a variety of food systems, both in the AU and the EU, to be resilient to different shocks and stress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shadrach. Thank you. That's really setting the scene for us. Try to look at the results of a study that was done to really tease out this food system's resilience. And I like the point you made that food systems resilience is not generally reflected in policy. And even in the EU-AU policy space, it's not something that has come out very clearly, and that some more effort is needed to make sure that the EU-AU policy partnership will focus on this critical issue moving forward, both in terms of research as well as in terms of innovation. I have one quick question for you, Shadrach. How could the EU-AU platform support policy making in Europe and Africa, that will drive resilient food systems? In your own mind, do you think that is something that is realistic to expect this EU-AU platform to do? Just a quick thought on that, please.
I think the partnership is a cooperative and knowledge exchange, particularly through evidence-based scientific policy development that could guide in the in terms of the partnership, could then guide in terms of the appropriate policies that are required to enable food system governance to be able to address the inequalities and effective response mechanisms to different shocks and stress. Okay, thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on your screen, you can see the result of the first poll. It tells us, we have a big problem with private sector. So far from what I see, it means private sector is 0, which is a very serious element to figure out how that gap really came in. Public sector, about 40% of us, and NGO development extension organizations are also there. Funding community is also there, but we can take note of those areas where we don't have people, and then we will have to build upon that. Okay, thank you. I think our technical moderator can take off this poll result, and when the result for poll 2 comes, she would also share that with us. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving into the heart of the matter, and this is where we now get into the panelist presentations, and it's still addressing the general theme of this side event, which is looking at the importance of the bicontinental platform to address resilient food systems and also to contribute to policy and state capability. So we are looking at both elements in there. We have 3 panelists who are going to share thoughts with us, and I'd like to introduce all the 3 panelists together so that when they start speaking, they don't get interrupted. First of all is Nyenka Buisman.
Nyenke is head of unit for the international cooperation policy in the European Commission within the Directorate General Research and Innovation, and she's held that position since 2019. She is in charge of developing and implementing the global approach to research and innovation, Europe's strategy for international cooperation, specifically focusing on Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Previous jobs held in DG Research and Innovation include as Deputy Head of Unit in charge of establishing public-private partnerships in research and innovation, and several other roles and positions that she has held in there. So we'll be hearing from Nyenke in a short while. But before then, let me go to our second panelist. And she is Alin Mugisho. Alin is the Executive Manager of the Innovative Youth in Agriculture project called iYouth. And this project is based in IITA, but it involves the MasterCard Foundation. Before taking on this role, she worked as a senior project manager for the European Youth Education Center in Germany. She previously worked as a senior consultant on various programs funded by the USAID, integrating gender and youth in agriculture in various projects. So we're very lucky to have Alin with us because she brings in diverse dimensions of actor perspectives, both in terms of youth, in terms of gender, and in terms of entrepreneurship. Our third panelist will be Ahmed Bahalim. Ahmed is a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he supports a portfolio on the collective achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 2 to end hunger and issue advocacy for public goods in agriculture, such as statistics and research and development. Obviously, because of this type of responsibility, Alin is very much keenly interested in partnership amongst donor agencies and development partners. And that's one of the things that I believe he would comment upon. So ladies and gentlemen, here are our three panelists. We have Nyenke. I don't see Nyenke's video. Probably she's opened it up. With Nyenke, and then with Alin, and we've got Ahmed. So let me first call Nyenke. Nyenke, you have 10 minutes to share your thoughts in relation to this overall theme. Over to you, please.
Yes, hi. Many thanks for giving me the floor. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm very happy to be part of this panel. I've been part of developing this partnership between the European Union and African Union on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture already from the policy point of view already for many years. So I am also, for example, very happy to see Mr. Mofuli. He has been a part of our expert group for many years. So this is great. And Jenny, of course, from Wageningen University, and happy to meet Alin and Ahmed as well in this panel. We have never met before. So you've indeed asked a couple of questions. What we've heard some of the background already, but I wanted to share with you some thoughts on the background from the policy perspective, from the European Commission perspective, and then also why we are so excited about this partnership, and especially the road it is taking. And it really is, in our opinion, developing in a sustainable partnership, a vision we had when it all started 5 years ago now, actually. So ensuring global food and nutrition security is one of the main objectives of the scientific cooperation between the EU and Africa, where both continents joined forces to address current and future challenges. faced by Africa and European agro-food systems, such as climate change, pest outbreaks, land degradation, and emerging crises such as COVID-19. And this is entirely situated more today than ever in the several political initiatives that we have on both sides, such as the communication towards a comprehensive strategy with Africa that the EU published last year. Also last year, in July last year, for the first time ever, all of our ministers, research and innovation ministers, met. And that's where we discussed what we have done for the last years, but also set the main priorities for the future. And of course, the green transition is one of these priorities that we have been working on for many years. The others are public health, innovation and technology, and capacities for science. And the ministers at this meeting really highlighted the importance of investing into green and sustainable economy through partnerships such as this one on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, but also a second one we set up, and it's a bit younger, on climate change and sustainable energy. As I said, this FNSSA, we used the abbreviation FNSSA partnership, was really the first one we set up as part of the political dialogue, the high-level policy dialogue, which was already mentioned, that has existed for more than 10 years, that we set up in 2016, actually. And this partnership focuses specifically on implementing actions to support sustainable intensification of agriculture production systems, food systems for nutrition, and the expansion and improvement of agriculture markets. These priorities, this roadmap was really designed together both by policymakers and the experts as part of the working group that was set up 5 years ago. And we, when it all started 5 years ago, we already believed that it was extremely important to put in place a support structure that would support this, would transform this partnership into a sustainable long-term platform for collaboration between both continents, with a long-term governance mechanism. It started off with on a project basis, although we also have longer term projects that were, let's say, twinning together other projects, such as the LEAP for FNSSA project. But I'm very happy to see that over 5 years, from a more project perspective, we're moving now really into a partnership platform perspective. And based on existing proven success of international research and innovation platforms in the form of what we call International Research Consortium, the African Union Commission and the European Commission have considered this option really as the most adequate platform governance mechanism to support a long-term knowledge management, a communication and governance mechanism for this partnership. And this is now what is being discussed, how to move into this International Research Consortium, who wants to join, and how is the governance going to look like. And maybe to finish, I would like to mention some benefits which we see from this platform. Which is the efficient deployment of funds, of national funds, but also European funds for both national and transnational research. We also believe that the cooperation would be much more cost effective, and a cost effectiveness of investment in research. Certainly the coordination of the research priorities will be improved, as well as the results, and the relevant research data for policymakers, for industry, for other stakeholders. The availability of this, the accessibility of this will be much improved through such a multi-stakeholder platform. as well as the availability of information on the capacity of national research. Developing the knowledge management system is a very important dimension of such a platform. And the consultation, once again, with policymakers, whereby we think that the responses required would be much faster. I also have some words on some new initiatives that we're launching on the side of the EU, but I'm not so sure, moderator, whether I should get to that now, or I should maybe leave the floor to my colleagues of the panel and get to that later. I would just I'd like to ask you this question.
Yes, actually, that was going to be one of the things that I felt would be important for you to touch on.
Yeah.
So probably you can go ahead very briefly and touch on that.
Okay. Okay, with pleasure, with pleasure. So as I mentioned already, one of the new policy initiatives that the Commission launched last year and this year, as also mentioned when introducing me, the Commission, the Department for Research and Innovation, published a new strategy on international cooperation on research and innovation, which we call the global approach. And here, the ambition is really to strengthen multilateral cooperation, partnerships, addressing common challenges such as green transition, health, and a digital transformation, always with a particular focus on innovation as a cross-cutting element. And this is done with a very much openness to the rest of the world, especially also vis-a-vis low and middle income countries that wish to transform their economy into a knowledge-based economy. And so the cooperation between the EU and Africa on research and innovation is a clear priority in this new strategy for the future. And the strategy is implemented partially through the EU's new research and innovation program, which is called Horizon Europe. This program started this year and it will run for the next 7 years with a budget of 95.5 billion euros. This, of course, is a program mostly addressed to research and innovation in the European Union, but entirely open to the world. And the first work program was launched in June for an amount of more or less 15 billion euros. And for the first time, we launched with this work program an initiative which we call the Africa Initiative, which is an ambitious package of around 36 topics under calls for proposals with a budget of 350 million euros. So this is really going to support collaborative research and innovation between the European Union and the African Union. And these calls, my colleague is giving you more information in the chat, are addressing priorities that the ministers who met last year actually raised and agreed upon. And the first one is food and nutrition security. So at the moment, there are many calls for collaborative research open, addressing the joint priorities that we set together in the area of food and nutrition security. This is really collaborative, the collaborative research activities. At the same time, the European Commission also has the program for capacity development. And this program is also expected to have a dedicated focus on digital science, technology, and innovation. And we're currently preparing in collaboration with the different countries in the African Union on what the capacity building in R&I should focus on. For example, the regional research institutions or the research infrastructure or the innovation ecosystems. Okay. And maybe to finish, I just wanted to say that in the last years we have mostly, we've really prioritized research collaboration, and there are lots of results, of course. And one of the weaknesses of this collaboration is that some of these results are sitting on the shelf or are not really finding their way to the market. And this is what we're discussing now with the African Union Commission. What to do about this, what are the results we're having, and we agreed on developing an innovation agenda. You may know that we have a summit, EU-AU summit next year, so our leaders are very keen to for us to present this innovation agenda, where we will be focusing much more on how are we using these results, what kind of support is needed, and as you said, private sector is not connected to our session today, and often also to our collaboration, and we want to greatly enhance this in the years to come. So let me finish there.
Wow, thank you so much, Ninke. This is wonderful. There's a lot of very important information you have given, and I believe there will be the appropriate links in the chat box. Unfortunately, due to technology, I can't see the chat box for the totality. I can only see the chat box of the panelists. So I don't know what goes on in the bigger chat box. Okay, I see a message from Mark that he has included all the links. So that is absolutely great. All right, let's move on to the second panelist. And ladies and gentlemen, let me encourage you once again to be active in the chat box. If any thought, I mean, from what we've just heard from Nyanka, there must have been all kinds of ideas in your mind. Feel free to put your thoughts in the chat box. Our next presenter is going to be Alin, and I've already introduced her as the Executive Manager of iYouth. Alin, over to you, please, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon to panelists as well as to other colleagues who are joining online. It is a great pleasure to be part of this discussion because I think this is timely and it is highly needed. So if I have to structure my presentation, I would like to speak primarily about the important role the youth and young women can play in transforming food system and particularly looking at resilient food system. How can we bring in the young people, especially from Africa, on board? And one of the key aspects you have raised earlier was partnership platforms and policies. This is indeed a highly important aspect that must be addressed. For example, at the moment, the IITA is implementing about 5 projects that focus on capacity development of young people, and among others, building young people to become agripreneurs, so empowering them through capacity development, incubation, accelerator model, coaching, and mentorship. The project iYouth, which is a partnership between MasterCard and the IITA, particularly focuses on 70% of young women and looks into all aspects of young people in various communities, including the young farmers who are the non-school educated youth, but who are actively involved into farming. We have the Start Them Early program, which focuses basically on younger youth who are in high school or at high school level, and we teach them agricultural technology and expose them to various aspects. But the additional or other projects focuses mainly on research, empowerment through capacity development, coaching, incubation, and business development, which means that most of the young cohorts from our youth in agribusiness programs are involved in one or either of these aspects that I have already highlighted. What is becoming much more clear to us is the first one is the enabling environment that is highly needed for the youth to be able to participate and strongly collaborate and show the support that they need to give into the agri-food system. Resilient food system requires participation, and that participation means the language we are speaking is actually easily understandable from a highly educated person to a younger, to a non-school educated person in the community who will be the one that will be involved in primary production and at the very first level of foods production through primary farming. And if this is where the value chain starts, this is also an important aspect that we need to bring out in the work that we do. The research that is produced, the innovations that emerge from the research front must be able to be translated in a language that a young farmer who's using those research, the seeds and the technologies can also understand in the very deep rural areas of Africa. And how do we do this? In capacity development, we can actually look into those that are active and those that are yet to participate in food production, and ensure that they are equipped with the necessary knowledge and the necessary capacity and tools that will make them to increase not only the food production, but also are able to be extremely involved into the transformation, reduction of food waste, and also the business model of that can generate from these partnerships must be one that does not only allow the youth to be agripreneurs, but one that also reinforces partnership between Africa and the European Union. The second aspect of it is about the sustainability component. The sustainability component means that if we are to create resilient food systems in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, we need to consider some of the key challenges that the continent is facing at the moment. My question has always been, when I travel for various countries in this continent, how can we ensure, like in Europe, like in the US, that all season or throughout the year, there's a stream of food that is running without being stopped? And part of that is the smart agriculture models that can be easily upscaled, and also that can be easily transferred, or the knowledge can be easily transferred to the younger people and the young women in the communities that are able to understand what it means to be involved in this without them necessarily using big vocabulary and terms. Another aspect of that sustainability and resilience mean we should be able to secure food even in off-farming season. When we have rainy season, you get a lot of work going on the farm, but the transition or the period between the harvest and the planting season is extremely high. What we are trying to do is to address the ADVET model, or to introduce the ADVET model, that we can couple that with vocational training. But when you look at the amount of food waste that happens in that process, it is quite important for us to think of technologies, systems, and structures that can allow us to keep that food transformation process going on throughout the season, and ensure that there is an equal division of food, produced food, through value addition and other form of agricultural components that may be involved. And those are the aspects where participatory research, community-based research, and community engagement is a very strong and important component. Another level for youth, and especially for young women, is the aspect of standardization. Practicing good agricultural practices and also implementing or even being able to use technologies that emerge and that would allow or reduce vulnerability for smallholder farmers, even at the level of transformation and value addition level, which is a more attractive aspect for the youth, requires a holistic approach that does not only consider food system as a means of survival, but as a part of life, as a way of life. And this is an important aspect where also technologies can come. Early warning signals for weather conditions and so on need to be much more pronounced for us to build that resilience. But above all, there's a strong component of the food system that is not at the moment, for instance, or remain very underexplored. Frozen food, for instance, it's a component that many young people could tap into in terms of the value addition and processing. that remains very, very low or underexplored. Women are not able to understand the important role that they can play at a longer term, and being able to create agriculture or to create an image of agriculture as a sustainable business. It's still about farming and selling, buying and selling, planting and harvesting, and there's those several aspects, including marketing, communication, digital transformation, that remains very much unexplored or underexplored. So, Kwesi, this is one of the aspects that is important. And the final one for my presentation today is linked to the exchange of knowledge and product between the two continents. We have young people who are studying in Europe who can potentially come down if we created an enabling environment for them to operate down here in the continent. I am one of those people who decided to come back to the continent to give my contribution based on the knowledge that I have acquired from Europe, the US, and elsewhere. If we can encourage such programs of those young African professionals in the agricultural sector, we will be able eventually to transform food system through better technologies, the machinery, the use of machinery and industrial level of agriculture. Those industries must be able to find an environment where they can operate. The standard what can I say, best farming practices is something that we need to be able to teach to the very indigenous farmer to the highest and highly educated farmer, so that those transformation, that cohesion, that coherence in action can continue to be coordinated throughout the year. And that is the only way through which we can ensure that the food system is as strong, it's resilient, and that's the only way for us to recover on what we are currently doing. So if we can think of platforms, perhaps one of those platforms would be to create a special trust fund on youth in agribusiness, where young people can be encouraged to go to other places, to championing places where climate smart agriculture is applied, where industrial agriculture is evolving, where innovations and technologies are being put into place to curb and to end hunger and poverty through agriculture, and make sure that that knowledge comes back to the continent. The encouragement of private sector development, a private sector specifically in agriculture, that is finding it easier for them to integrate and work with the young farmers. We have a lot of efforts that has been developed, like the fair trade efforts and so on, but these are still at a very, very high level. We need to bring that down to the young farmer on the ground for us to be able to do it. IITA is already involved in a lot of efforts. Our advocacy work at the moment is around how can we ensure that companies who want to involve themselves in agriculture from elsewhere, or those industries that can come and operate here in the continent, find a good environment to operate, so that can also be able to create job and employment for younger people, but also increase capacity. But we need to have those knowledge, education-wise, and as capacity-wise, policy-wise, finance-wise. That platform needs to be created for us to better evolve in the agri-food system. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Alin. That's excellent. You're really giving us a lot of food for thought. And I'm sure that some of the discussion that will come in the chat box may relate to some of these areas, but these are very important. And the last thing you said there, it sort of rings in my ear, like establishing some kind of a youth core collaboration between Europe and Africa, where there is funding available to bring people, Africans who are training in Europe, and they know they come back and they can link into some of these processes. I think that's a very important part that one would need to look at as we move on. But I really do appreciate the emphasis you have placed on the importance of youth in this whole dimension. Okay, let me move on now to our third panelist. Our third panelist has also been introduced already, that he is a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ahmed Bahalim. Ahmed, can I ask you to take the floor and share your thoughts in relation to be interesting to see how what you are going to say relates to some of the things that Nyanka basically mentioned in her presentation, showing some very positive ways forward in terms of what the European Union and European Commission is working on in support of agriculture, food systems and resilience, etc. And I can see lots of possibilities for linking with other development partners. So Ahmed, please take the floor and let's hear from you.
Sure. Thank you, Kwesi. It's a tough act to follow, Alin and Nyanka. So thank you for putting me in this wonderful but difficult position. So I'll take the time I have today to talk about the investment gap in agriculture, agricultural R&D, and the role of partnership, sort of as broad themes. And then to kind of think very specifically about what Nyanka said and Alin said, I think that's probably better dealt with in discussion, but I'll cover that as well to some extent. So as you've likely heard from my co-panelists, and you'll probably hear this again over the course of this year's AGRF, the world is not on track to meet the agriculture and nutrition related global goals. In 2020, 811 million people were chronically undernourished. This is a number that's grown every year since 2015, and it's a reversal, a substantial reversal, and decades-long trend of decreasing hunger. Disturbingly, the sharpest rise this past year in hunger was in Africa, where the estimated prevalence of undernourishment is at 21%. It's more than double that of any other region. So it's quite pressing for us to talk about this at this year's AGRF. This trend in itself is quite disturbing to see this happen over the last 4 or 5 years. But the pandemic more recently, due to the economic slowdown and the growing climate crisis, are worsening things. Colleagues in East Africa and Southwest Asia last year were witness to the desert locust crisis. So, not only do we have a pandemic, we're literally dealing with a plague of locusts. And this is the worst locust crisis that we've had in almost 20 years or so. Although additional analysis is needed, unusual weather patterns were probably to blame for the locust crisis specifically. So now that we know that we're not on track to end hunger, Sustainable Development Goal 2, and we know that global crises such as the pandemic and climate change will only make things worse, what is it that we should do? So fortunately, some of our partners have produced analysis in this area to suggest some course of action, because it's not enough to complain and identify problems. We need to think about what the solutions might be. One of these partners of ours, the Series 2030 project, a collaboration between Cornell University, IFPRI, and the International Institution for Sustainable Development, published their findings last year in the journal Nature. And they suggest that we need to invest more in agricultural development to end hunger while sustainably doubling small-scale producer productivity and incomes within the constraints of the Paris Climate Accord, right? So we're trying to achieve the agriculture-related targets under Sustainable Development Goal 2 with awareness of sustainability and the Paris NDCs as sort of another constraint. They argue, the Series 2030 project, that we need a portfolio of investments working together. So not sort of a piecemeal approach where we provide one silver bullet here and another one there. And they encourage us to look at roughly 3 different buckets that we need to consider how we empower the excluded. So vulnerable groups, say from women to neglected minorities, to then what we need to make sure happens on the farm. So there are certain things that we need to make sure that happen on the farm, from say improved access to different seed varieties, different technologies, et cetera, to then for us to also think about what happens to farm goods when they're on the move. You know, it's not enough to just think about what actually takes place on the farm. We also need to think about the whole system. How do things make it to market? Why don't they, et cetera? And at the heart of their findings is agricultural R&D. And they find that we need to invest in ag R&D to achieve a variety of these goals. So ag R&D is not an end in itself. It's a tool that we use to achieve goals that we've set together. The Sears 2030 project's headline number is $33 billion. They believe that we need to invest about $33 billion more per year to achieve the goals that I just mentioned, with roughly 14 billion coming from donors and roughly 19 billion coming from partner countries. This figure includes investment in agricultural R&D, both through NARS and the CGIAR. It doesn't include, say, what takes place under Horizon Europe, for example, the subject of our discussion today. Another recent report from IFPRI focused specifically on agricultural R&D, which was prepared for inclusion in the IPCC's 6th assessment report, finds that to prevent the number of hungry from rising due to climate change, we need to invest about $2 billion a year in agricultural R&D alone. So as you can tell, I mean, these numbers, they sound big, but they're modest in comparison to what the public purse has. A modest investment today could help constrain the worst from happening later. That the most vulnerable in our societies would end up suffering from a fate not of their choosing, something that's posed upon them, especially when we think about the climate crisis. And if we do make this public investment, the Sears 2030 folks argue that this will induce private sector investment on average of about $52 billion a year in primary and processed food sectors from both small and large scale producers. So that private sector piece that we discussed that's missing today actually depends a bit on the public sector showing leadership here. Now, I've just talked about global goals, global targets, and then if we focus or turn our attention to regional goals and targets, such as those are agreed under the Malabo and Maputo commitments, we're also not on track. While there are important successes, especially in countries in East Africa, we're still far off from the public investment target of 10% to agriculture. And then more recently, just a few weeks ago, actually, experts have now suggested that we should aim to invest 1% of agricultural GDP in agricultural R&D to achieve food systems related goals. So the food systems approach being a more expansive and broader way of looking at things, and that requires us to think about different goals or targets on how and what we should fund. So unfortunately, current trends in investment in agriculture, so I've laid out to you these price tags. So we need to figure out, are we on track to provide this kind of investment? The current trends are not promising, especially in agricultural R&D. A report from a partner of ours, the Supporters of Agricultural Research Foundation, whose findings were recently published in the American Journal of Agricultural Economics, show that neither developed nor developing countries are investing at the rates needed in agricultural R&D. There are interesting things happening. Middle-income countries, primarily in Asia, now make up the majority of global agricultural R&D investment. That's quite fascinating. But unfortunately, Sub-Saharan Africa as a region and low-income countries as a group continue to lag behind. At the same time, the SOAR paper shows us that investment in agricultural R&D is very, very high return. So if we look at the CGIAR, we find that $1 put in generates $10 in economic benefits. For the data that's available regionally, $1 invested in Europe generates $47 in economic benefits. $1 invested in Sub-Saharan Africa generates $20 in benefits. Clearly, R&D is a great buy. And I'm sure I don't need to tell my co-panelists this, but we need to make sure that policymakers, as they think about funding decisions, are aware of this kind of information. So the picture that I've painted on trends, it doesn't sound promising, but this is probably where the role of an EU-AU partnership and the platform comes in, because it's one way to address this challenge. You might already know that the EU under Horizon Europe has nearly doubled its investment in agricultural R&D over its next 7-year budget cycle. This is significant in itself as the EU seeks to increase research intensity across its economy, but also because Horizon Europe is one way for us to think about this EU-AU partnership. And it could reimagine how we think about the system as a whole. So I won't bother you with a slide, but I want you to kind of get a picture in your mind that it might be helpful to think about R&D as sort of a spectrum where you have on one end, say through high throughput genomics, sort of high capacity work that's more theoretical. And then on the other end, we have the need to get new tools and technologies in the hands of farmers. And there's kind of a role that different institutions across this spectrum could play. So the role of partnership could be to bring together disparate institutions to address a common challenge. So our co-organizers from both Wageningen and IITA already represent this in some ways. And as noted in the EU-Africa high-level policy dialogues roadmap, there's also a temporal dimension. We also, not only do we need to think about the spectrum that I've described, but we also need to think about the short, medium, and long-term actions that we need to invest in. And so with these elements in mind, a partnership or platform facilitates this kind of thinking, and that's why it's important. We need to answer questions by setting the right kind of research priorities. We need to build relationships, talk to each other by coming to the same table. And we need to deliver results because we've agreed to a common set of goals. So if we think about this spectrum of research needs, we can position some upstream and theoretical work with European partners. We can conduct applied research with CGIAR centers, and we can translate and implement findings to locally specific contexts with national agricultural research and extension systems, and working with folks like Alin, who just spoke before me. Any partnership or platform will then need to figure out how do we build the right kinds of positive feedback loops, right? Because you need information from the farmers going all the way up to the fancy labs that we might find elsewhere. Then there's an advantage here. If we think about partnerships, we're then not beholden to a single budget. We're not beholden to a specific set of goals, but we can collectively deliver on these different pieces if we make sure that they fit together. To some extent, our partners at the foundation, they're already working on such an approach. From our side, we've already co-invested, for example, with European partners under the DESIRA framework to help agriculture adapt to climate change. And in global health, we've been collaborating for many years with European partners on vaccines and other research. And so Horizon Europe and the platform and partnership that we're discussing today, they offer us a renewed opportunity in face of all of the headwinds that I laid out to scale up the kind of research that's needed. And for others to join and support this, we'll need to think through not only the theory that I've just described, but also key practicalities, such as how are decisions made, where do funds sit, who's eligible, what are the comparative advantage of the different participants, and are there common yet strategically aligned goals that we have? So as we turn to discussion, I'd be curious to get the thoughts of participants on what successful partnership would look like through a platform like the one that we've discussed. And what do you think should be the complementarities of partners or the contributions of its participants? So with this question in mind and the interest of time, I'll stop here and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. This is really very exciting. You've touched on, let me first of all thank all our three panelists. I think they've all done an amazing piece of work. And there's also a lesson that we have to take away. You don't always have to show PowerPoint. Because sometimes when you align your thinking and you present without PowerPoint, it sort of sinks in, much more. At least that's what I'm experiencing. So many thanks to our three speakers. And the very key point you made, that we're very far from being on track when it comes to SDG 2. I think that's a key point. And then you mentioned 3 baskets that need to be considered. And you talked about empower the excluded, and also you mentioned the importance of the whole tracking from whatever is produced on farm to how it goes in there and how it ends up where it is supposed to end up. So that is the brokerage mechanism. And I think that whole intermediation dimension is often missing in a lot of cases. And then finally, you talk about the importance of R&D, not as an end in itself, but as a tool in that process. And that's also a very, very valid thing. Now, you made a point that the need is growing. Hunger is growing, particularly in Africa, that our records are not good at all. And yet the gap in funding between what we are getting and what is needed, that gap seems to be growing. And then finally, you said ongoing trends are also not very positive in terms of how these things have been pulled together. Now that leaves me, a bit worried. But at the same time, you indicate the positive things about the fact that investment in agricultural research and development is very positive. And the fact that a number of development partners are putting more and more money, such as we have heard Horizon 2020 and all those other European Union initiatives that we heard about. The African Union also talks about a number of portfolio moving forward. And you made a point, which I think is very important, this point about co-investment, co-investment, where, the big players don't always have to initiate something from scratch, but really try to understand what is the ecosystem out there and where can they engage. So these are very important elements. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are all as excited as I am, having listened to these three keynote presentations, but we are at a point where we want to look at some questions that may have come in from the chat box so that when necessary, we can get our panelists to address. My problem is I'm not able to see any of the chat box. I'm only seeing the panelists in my own chat box. So I would like our technical facilitator to advise us if there is any question or comment in the chat box. You can put some message to Jenny so that we can know how to address that. But whilst we wait for that, let me make a question to Ahmed, because you have just spoken. And let me say, what do you foresee as some of the major challenges that may need to be resolved to make it easier for funding agencies such as yours, which are not country-based, to make it easier for such foundations to buy into the kind of platform that we're talking about, EU, AU, platform, etc. What will it take to get BMGF also part of this? Can you address that?
Yeah, leaving me with the easy questions. Great start to Monday morning in Seattle. So I guess maybe I'll just describe how we generally work. And maybe that's like a good way to frame, why a particular partnership or particular project might be helpful, important, or meaningful. So generally speaking, the foundation works as a catalytic funder. We're not a government. There is a particular and different role that we could potentially play in this space. And we're always trying to figure out what is it that we could be doing specifically with our use of voice and resources at the table that other actors cannot do. And so if for us to consider, any partnership period, the first things that comes to mind, or the one thing that I'd be asked by my superiors in our leadership would be, what is the particular problem that we're trying to solve through a platform or partnership or participation in anything? Is it strategically aligned to the goals that we've internally set? If so, how? And then the pivot would be very clearly to the practicalities. If, for example, we put funding into a pooled resource, how will it be allocated? And will it be allocated in a way, again, that's aligned with the priorities that we've already set internally. So it's those kinds of questions that we need to end up answering. And then it's usually helpful for a partner to come to the table with a particular vision of their own. There's obviously an important power dynamic here in terms of a funding institution and how it works with external partners. And in my experience, it's usually been best when those two goals or targets that we have are organically aligned, right? So it's not that there's a sort of request offer or response feedback, but rather there's a particular goal or target that a partner's already set, and they know how they're going to get there, and they just need the resources. And in the case where those two pieces are aligned, the foundation is a really good partner. But when there's that kind of tension that isn't constructive, it's usually not a good fit. And so that's just me speaking as a program officer as I deal with different grants that come across my desk. And more specifically in terms of this EU-AU partnership, the practicalities are really important. Where does funding sit? How is it allocated? Who's eligible, et cetera? Those are key questions that are the second order from, say, are we strategically aligned, that I then need to think about answering in terms of how things are worked through our processes. Now, finally, maybe the most important thing for folks, say in my chair at the foundation or at other institutions, what they probably also need to think about is, what is the kind of multiplier effect that we gain from partnership? What is it that we can do here in a given partnership or platform that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do alone? Is there a particular increase in funding? Are we building a bigger community that's more aligned with our goals than we otherwise wouldn't be able to do? So those kind of like positive externalities, what are they? If we can identify them, figure them out, then it makes the case for participation in something that would be more bureaucratically complex than us, say, providing funding for a specific project. It makes that case stronger and more clear. So I hope those three, say, points have answered the question, as difficult as it might be on an early Monday morning in Seattle.
No, thank you so much, Ahmed. I think this is really excellent. Addressing these very specific issues definitely helps to build that co-investment and the partnerships that you're talking about. I will shortly be asking Nyanka for her thoughts on some of the things that you have raised. But before Nyanka comes on, I'd like to say that your point that the foundation works as a catalytic funder is a very significant one. And to give you just a personal experience, I work as part of the Africa Development Bank funded initiative called Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, which is a huge initiative of the Africa Development Bank for the implementation of their Feed Africa strategy. And about 3 years ago, we got into negotiation with the foundation, the Gates Foundation. And currently the foundation is funding a very important component, which is called the clearinghouse component. And this is the component that really supports technology brokerage and also supports engagement with countries. And that is funded through the foundation, adding value to the work that the Africa Development Bank has been doing. So that catalytic thing, and that's what I'm trying to see as possibly emerging out of this EU-AU platform, and the foundation also discovering somewhere that they can also contribute in that regard. Let me pass on to Nyanka. Nyanka, would you have any thoughts to put forward?
Yes, are there any particular, is there any particular point you would like me to address? Sorry to
I think, but particularly in relation to what one may see as some of the challenges involved in getting a non-country fund like the foundation coming in and being a partner in a platform which clearly is EU-AU partnership. Do you see any blockages in that type of engagement?
Yes, there are always challenges, I think, in partnerships because as Ahmed was also addressing, we need to see where we align. And I think that, the European Union already has a lot of collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I think particularly, at least on the side of RNI in the area of health, we have another very big partnership with Africa, which we call the European and Development Countries Clinical Trials Partnership on infectious R&D and infectious diseases, and there we have a partnership with the BM. Jeff already. So it is possible. I think politically, and the vision is often aligned. Where do we want to go? What are the challenges? I think both the European Commission and an organization as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we are addressing, of course, let's say political challenges, the SDGs that countries around the world have agreed on, and that's what we are trying to align our financing to. So I think that in the end, with these kind of partnerships, it's not the political vision or the objectives we're setting ourselves where we have maybe a disagreement, but it's probably the modalities of cooperation. This is what we're always seeing, and it's not just an international organization or the Commission. It is also aligning, for example, national funders in this partnership or the private sector, because we all have our way of investing, our way of spending our budget. We all have our rules, and of course, the European Commission isn't always so known for a lot of flexibility. It's also comprehensible, I think, because we're representing 27 member states. We have to agree before a program with all these member states before a program is developed. And in terms of, for example, how are we dispersing our funds? Are we working through calls for proposal? Can we fund projects directly? How are we making our choice? What are our evaluation criteria? How are we signing grant agreements? Who needs to sign? How are we using our evaluators, etc.? So what I see from my experience is that often, as I said, political vision is aligned with, now of course there's the G agenda and the policy on both sides, but it's the nitty gritty, and there needs to be flexibility on both sides to find a common way of doing. So that I would see as one of the biggest challenges. But it works. We have good examples. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think this is very helpful. We actually drawing pretty close to the end. Shadrach, I see your hand, and I'd like you to, as soon as Shadrach finishes, we'll run this poll. The poll is on, and the poll says the proposed bi-continental EU-AU platform could make major contribution in advancing food systems resilience for the two continents. And you can choose your take on there. Shadrach, please go ahead and make your point.
Yes, thank you. I think this discussion is quite good. It is part and parcel of what we have been discussing in the HLPD working group on food nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, the FNSSA working group, around exactly whether the partnership is limited to only the AU and the EU, both in terms of the projects, but also in terms of the impact pathways that we need to be able to achieve. I think the principle in the partnership is really around how do we leverage other partnerships to enhance the existing AU-EU partnership to have the kind of impact that it really needs. So one of the things that we have done in the working group as well is another study that looked at a range of the different types of projects that have been funded through the AU-EU partnership, but also one of the observations in those in that particular study was that although quite a number of the projects might have been directly funded through the particular partnership, the AU-EU, some of them were bilateral, some of them were multilateral, meaning that there were a whole range of other partners outside of the AU-EU partnership that added value to the partnership. So it is quite insightful and important that this particular partnership, which we hope will grow into what we would then call an international research consortium, will enable other role players to add value to the success of this particular partnership in order for it to have the kind of impact that it really needs, particularly with respect to food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, and add in the kind of resilience to the shocks in the system in different ways. Because let's be real, resources will never be sufficient. So we always need to find resources from a variety of different ways. And we always need to find a way in which some of these resources can complement each other in a manner that's going to have the greatest impact in a shorter space of time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. This is very, very helpful information. I think you've made a point. Resources will never be enough. And that puts even more pressure on us to be strategic. If you have a little bit of money, you can't solve the problem by yourself. So you've got to look at a strategic use and strategic placement of that money and who you can collaborate with. And I think that's the sort of discussion that we have been raising in here. Let me remind you, the poll is on. It says the bicontinental platform could make major contribution. Obviously, there's a lot of detail, which is not in the poll, but at least this is an aspiration thing that you are expressing. So let's get that, and our technical facilitator would show us the result. While that is going on, I want to alert Alin. Alin, I really enjoyed your presentation, and we've heard a lot from both Ahmad and from Yenka on this issue we've just discussed. But from you, I want you to ground it again in the context of the youth. And my question is, what needs to be done to make this platform, the platform that we are trying to establish, to make it of interest to young people and to young entrepreneurs? What should the platform do, to really attract this very important caliber of actors? Any thoughts?
Thank you very much, Kwesi. I think the first one is to really build targeted partnerships that targets the youth as primary actors and women as active participants. It's often the case that when women are engaged in agriculture, they're engaged in extremely hard work. But when it comes to logistics, transportation, processing, and particularly when it comes to gainful employment, it becomes very complicated. We need to create a revolution in the industry. And that revolution is a revolution that is going to put the youth and the young women here in the continent as primary actors, because that is actually a succession plan. That's the revolution through which the food industry will be able to understand how much food is being produced, how much food is being consumed, how much food is being exported, and how much food is being wasted. And then we can know where to redirect this food or how to save this food and redistribute it equally among the people. We speak a lot about gender equality. We speak a lot about equal opportunities and diversity. Perhaps we need to get to a point where we also speak about food security equality, whereby people can be able to access the food, not because the food is expensive or so, but because the food distribution channel, the food distribution and the food security models are catered and tailored to the need of the people themselves. And finally, there is an important component that needs to be taken into consideration. There is no way the young people who are contributing to agriculture today will do so if there is no decent, dignified employment that are being created, and that can only happen through industrialization. If we don't industrialize agriculture, if we don't have an industry, for instance, we cannot think about a marketing strategy. We cannot think about communicating food differently. Agriculture in Africa is still attached to that very sad, bad image. The woman or the young person in agriculture is not one that is going to think about entering the communication industry, the marketing industry, the media industry, and market and spend time in creating a concept. The digitalization should inform us to linkages, markets, international markets, EU, Africa market that are available, and the requirements of the food off-takers. So if we do that, then we know who is needing what, we are producing productively, and we are producing purposely, knowing the needs of the people on the ground, the need of the buyers, and the need of those that can help in preserving the food. So that's perhaps my contribution at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alin. These are very, very important points. We need to create a revolution that puts youth and women at the core of all these things, you know, if we don't get them in. And I think that's a very strong point coming in from you, and I agree on that. Technical moderator, can you give us the result of the poll? We'll soon see the result of the poll that we have on the screen. And while that is going on, I don't see any hands. So while that is going on, let me say that one dimension that I find a little bit underrepresented in a lot of the thinking, we're talking about food systems and all that. A dimension that I think is missing to me is a dimension of food safety. You know, if you're dealing with Africa, you've got to realize that food safety is a key issue. It's not just the question of wastage and production and everything, but the basic question is, what are people eating? You know, what exactly are people eating? And the European Union, the European community, they always reject a lot of exports that are made from Africa because they find those things unhealthy, either because they have some chemicals or they have whatever. And I think by extension, it's very clear that if the best produce we export is unhealthy, then what are we eating? Those of us on the ground. And I think somewhere along the line, from the top level to the bottom level, somebody must be raising these questions. What is happening and what mechanisms can be put in there? What specific engagement? And that's one thing that I personally would canvass for as part of the EU-AU partnership, that this food safety dimension is given visibility. And I know Nyanke might want to comment on that at some point, but before she does that, let's look at the results. And it's a very interesting mix. About 80%, so moderately agree. Okay, that's realistic. And I mean, people are basically saying, look, there's a lot more detail that we cannot, it's a lot of, things that have to be in place. So I think that's very clear. And that means for those of us trying to pull this partnership together, we really have a lot of homework to do to really think ahead, to figure out what are the things that we need to make sure are going to be in place. Very good. Now, let me look at my time. Okay, all right, we are not doing too badly. So I don't know, Nyanke, did you want to make a point in relation to this strong issue I made concerning food safety? How big an issue is it?
Yeah. Yes, I'm back. I can make a point, although I'm not at all an expert in that domain. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, this partnership and the roadmap we agreed on in 2016 has three priorities, and the third one is the expansion and improvement of agriculture markets and trade. So, as you said, the safety dimension is an important element of this. The rules, let's say, of entering the EU markets may appear very strict to some other partners in the world. And one of our departments, it's not the R&D department, but it's more our health department, food safety department is of course very much involved in this. And I think the focus, but maybe some of my colleagues, maybe I don't know if our colleague from South Africa is still connected, but because he knows more the details of this collaboration, what exactly is being looked at. A lot of training is being proposed, discussion, because sometimes it's also more, let's say, the knowledge about what the rules exactly are. But this is one of the three priorities of this partnership. So I guess a lot of projects are focusing on this. But I would prefer perhaps Ms. Mofuli to come in to this, because you're much more connected to the details of this partnership, if you want to.
If I may, Chairperson, just quickly, in our analysis, when we looked at the number of projects that are ongoing in terms of the EU partnership, they range quite broadly. They look at aspects of capacity building, individual capacity building. They look at strengthening partnerships and alignment between regions and nations, but they also look at the number of other things, such as fundamental research, and in there would be aspects that deal with food safety, post-harvest handling, and so on. They do look at institutional capacity building and institutional arrangements, obviously. That talks to building the resource capabilities of the institutions that need to provide the services for our food systems. But they also do some work around applied research, and quite a number of the majority of the projects that have been funded under the EU partnerships, a significant proportion of them, about 55% of them, focused on development and innovation orientation. So it's quite a broad spectrum, so to speak, of these kinds of projects. And they do pay attention to the priorities as articulated in the arrangements between the AU and the EU. And perhaps as we look at some of these particular priorities and review them, some of these could come up at a higher level of priority and receive greater attention. The EU's work that is ongoing at setting up a knowledge management system, which will serve as a repository of all the different projects that have been funded to date. And you could search them by subject matter and subject area and be able to get a sense as to what projects have been ongoing, which ones have been funded, which ones have actually been implemented, and what are the data that say about the projects, so that you can use them as lessons for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shadrach, for that very useful additional information. Colleagues, on your screen, you have the last poll we are running. It's a bit different from what you just dealt with. This one says, what do you see as the biggest benefits that could come out of the bicontinental platform? And here you are free to take more than one, but we're really talking about, as you look at the platform, where do you think the biggest benefits would come in if the platform were to invest in these areas? So let me give you 1 minute to reflect on that. and then we would move on. Okay, so moderator, if you can show the results, that will be appreciated. And whilst the results are being shown, I want to inform all our panelists and also our setting the scene speaker. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for your closing point, so you can start reflecting on what you think would be your closing point moving forward. What do you want your take-home message that you are driving, and try and focus on this AU-EU platform in relation to the perspective that you hold. On the screen, we see the results. Enhanced dialogue, pursue us not giving any point. Strengthened partnerships. We heard quite a lot about that, and collaboration between Europe and Africa. But the biggest one we saw is strengthened partnerships between research and innovation organizations and other stakeholder groups. So that component came in very strong. And I think it sort of responds to what Ahmad said, that the investment in agricultural research for development is really huge. And that's a key area that one needs to focus on. There is also increased knowledge and evidence. Yeah, increased, am I reading the right thing? Oh, no, I'm sorry. The biggest word, yeah, is a strengthened partnership. And then below that is the increased knowledge and evidence-based policies in support of agricultural development of the two countries. So there will be more evidence given. And then we have increased funding also from Europe and Africa countries in support of agricultural research and innovation. Scaling innovations at a faster pace, that's, I think I'm reading it from. Anyway, these are very helpful, very helpful. We would analyze them further and see how we build them into the final conclusions. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we're drawing to the end, and I want to give each speaker a maximum of 2 minutes to basically make their closing pitch in this. And I will start from Shadrach. Shadrach, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important we recognize that this is a journey to build this particular partnership between the AU and the EU. It is a journey that is intended to enable cooperation between the AU and the EU and coordination and knowledge exchange. Hopefully, it will also improve and increase our trade interdependence between Africa and the EU. And of course, once we increase and enhance the capabilities of the interdependence of trade between Africa and the EU, there will be more jobs created, and there will be much more increased food production and productivity, as well as enabling food security for all. Hopefully, this will also help in addressing some of the territorial or geographic challenges in terms of rural development, particularly as we know that Africa as a continent remains the last part of the globe where the greatest potential for increasing food production as well as productivity, it still has a particular opportunity to do so. And therefore, we need to explore how better to increase our investments in that particular space in partnership together with our partners in the EU. Of course, that means we need to work together to develop policies for transforming our food systems such that our food systems are aligned to one another. Our interdependence, both in terms of trade and food and nutrition security, are intertwined, and we cannot ignore that. And they are of particular importance. We need to ensure that we enable the research and innovation system to produce the necessary evidence-based policy advice for the partnership to be successful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. These are excellent concluding points. I'd like to move on straight to Nyanka. Nyanka, over to you, please.
Okay, I'm losing connection all the time. Yes, I think that in this partnership or in this EU-AU collaboration on RNI that we have now been running for many years, from the policy perspective, we really believe in working as partners, meaning where we are agreeing on our priorities together, we are co-creating our programs, and we are co-investing in our programs. And we would like to see this not just from the policy perspective, but also from the implementation perspective. And that's why we really believe, and we are supporting as European Commission, and I believe in collaboration with the African Union Commission in creating this international research consortium. We think that this is a way of creating a sustainable partnership, because that's what we want, something sustainable and lasting, that is bringing together all stakeholders, because the second element I wanted to point out is that the research we're investing in, we want this to have impact, an economic impact on the ground. So we need to bring together not just the researchers, but also other stakeholders such as the private sector. So my first message. Second message, of course, Horizon Europe is only one of the tools, but there are many opportunities at the moment in support of this partnership, in addition to this partnership. So those who are connected in Brussels, it's the end of the afternoon. Please have a look at the Funders and Tenders portal, and we're always there also to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyanka. Thank you very much. Now I ask Alin for your closing thoughts.
Thank you, Kwesi, and this has been indeed a needed conversation. We need to be more engaged in this kind of platforms to be in tune of what is happening between the two continents. If I may say, the first thing that we need to do is to improve agricultural market between the two continents. The policy needs to be well formulated and tailored to the needs of the consumers and the needs of the producers. If we have a standard, you spoke about, for instance, the foods that get rejected or wasted because it didn't meet the right standard for export. That's a clear issue. That is basically a time-ticking bomb into not only food insecurity in the future, but next level of disease, and that could eventually impact not only the lives, but also the security of the entire continent and the rest of the world. We know what we are facing today when such things happen. So we need to be aware of the environment in which we are operating. A one-size-fits-all model is not going to work. We need to be able to understand each of the countries within the the African Union, what's the needs and the pressing needs that country is, and tap into the agenda of the country in terms of developmental agenda, the food security plans they have, what level of resiliences and resilient systems have been developed within the agricultural sector in those spaces. Policy means stakeholder engagement, It means review and reform. It also means an evaluation of what has worked and what did not work. And so if we can include all of this in drawing new policies, we will likely draw policies that are not only staying in the shelves, but policies that are addressing the real need of the people on the ground. Finally, we need to address these challenges that are limiting the free movement and circulation of food, because that's one of the key reasons for food insecurity. For instance, we have different kind of security, access to road, infrastructure development, technological developments, lack of enabling environments for industrial development. All of these issues affect clearly and strongly the development of a resilient food system in Africa. And perhaps these are some of those issues that things in the middle.
Thank you. My apologies for cutting you on, because I'm just getting nervous because our time is closing in. Let me give the final word to Ahmed. Ahmed, what's your closing thought or your closing pitch for us?
Sure. The first idea is to not follow Alin. Be sure to not do that. It's a tough act. But more seriously, I guess from what I said earlier, it's quite clear that we need to invest more in agricultural R&D across the world. But as Mufuli and Nyanka and Alin to an extent noted, resources are not enough. So of course, it's not as if we can throw enough resources at a problem to solve it, but we need to figure out what are the different institutions or partnerships that come together to make those things happen. So if we shift towards that, thinking that resources are not enough, then I think we need to think more deeply about the comparative advantage of the different participants. There's some things that are better done in Europe. There's some things that are better done in Africa. What are they? And are we making sure that we're making the best use of the different strengths that are available there? So I'll leave you with that question. And I think that's probably the right note for me to end on. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again to all our 4 speakers. Thank you so much. There is one person who has been prime in planning this event. And this person is the one who has actually worked the most in making this whole thing happen. And that's Jenny. We haven't heard Jenny's voice. I want Jenny to come on and tell us what is the information, what happens next, okay? So Jenny, please come on, let's see you, and then share with us what comes next. And that will be our closing pitch for the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. And thank you all panelists, thank you participants. I hope that there are 2 slides I would like to show you, and I hope they will now be on a proper format. What is happening next is, as you could see with Kwesi, unfortunately, it has been difficult to engage with our participants. So that is certainly the first thing we would like to do. If you want to have more information about what we have discussed, this bicontinental platform that is under development, and please, you are welcome to join us to further discuss this. We are looking for a group of committed institutions representing different stakeholder groups, as has been emphasized, to work jointly for the mid to long term towards a commonly defined goal under a shared governance mechanism. We want to implement commonly agreed activities and discuss all these tough questions that the panelists have also already highlighted here. And if you have only 1 minute, please look at the form or just copy the QR code. I tried it out. Just put your phone in front of the QR code. It will lead you automatically to the website. And please join us for the real discussions. And I'm sorry that that was difficult today, but we hope that you have enjoyed it. and are interested to continue the discussion with us. Thank you very much. Kwesi, over to you.
Excellent, excellent, Jenny. That's wonderful. And thank you so much for your planning and everything in relation to this event. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had a very interesting discussion. We only had a technical glitch when we cannot see the chat box from our side. I think now it seems to be coming in at the end of the session. But I just want to thank all of you because we've been able to glean from your thoughts in relation to this subject matter of food systems, but particularly looking at the platform, EU-AU platform. We've had very important information and also looking at the thoughts coming from the Commission, as the European Commission, thoughts coming from a youth program, and thoughts also coming from a foundation. So all together, it's been very good. And obviously, the policy aspects, we've been able to take a lot of advantage of Shadrach's prior involvement in the high-level policy dialogue and pointed us to a number of key areas. So we can assure you there is going to be a synthesis report prepared. As long as your email has been given in the chat box, or we have your email through some other means, you would be getting it. So please, if you would want us to keep following up with you, kindly make sure you've put your email in the chat box so that we would not miss you out. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure moderating this event, and I wish you all the best. Please remember the AGRF proper starts tomorrow. Wow, and you don't want to miss it. The real event. What we're doing is a pre-event, side events, but the real meat starts tomorrow. So I wish you all well as you prepare yourself for that. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.